Hey, welcome back, everyone. Yeah, I hope you guys had a great morning, learning at all the sessions, networking with all the friends you haven't seen for a long time. So I'm Lisa Motoyama. I'm the treasurer of the Housing California Board of Directors and senior affordable housing finance consultant for the nonprofit Community Economics. At Community Economics, we provide expertise in the field of nonprofit, community-based affordable housing finance and development through direct technical assistance and training to nonprofit developers and as a leader in local, state, and national housing policy. Before we dive into this afternoon's plenary, I want to review a few housekeeping items. Okay. First, we want to ensure you have the best possible conference experience. Our mobile app, Whova, is a great source of information, so if you haven't downloaded it yet, please do so. You can get your questions answered at our info table or check-in at the check-in table. Second, for the safety of all our guests, please remember to leave the event immediately if you have COVID-19 symptoms or find out if you were in close contact with someone that has tested positive, and wear a mask covering your face and mouth at all times except when actively eating, drinking, or presenting. Okay. Now I'd like to invite Ari Belyak, President and CEO of Merit Community Capital Corporation and one of our title sponsors, to the stage to provide a few remarks and introduce this afternoon's plenary. We are grateful to Merit's title sponsorship and generous contribution to our Emerging Leaders Scholarship Fund, as well as Ari's long personal commitment to the affordable housing sector. Thank you again, and I look forward to engaging in this plenary with all of you.
Thank you, Lisa. How are you doing? All right. Can you hear yourself? Yeah. You can hear, okay. All right. Good afternoon. Hello. Thank you. I must say, it is wonderful. It is wonderful to be at Housing California's 2023 conference and to be with so many great friends in this room. I can't remember when I was with so many amazing people all at once. So thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ari Belyak. I'm the President CEO of Merit Community Capital. First, I want to thank the Housing California staff for putting on this amazing conference. And I'd like to thank Shioni for being an amazing partner, for coming in, leading strong, and really taking the organization to the next level. So thank you, Shioni. So over the past 30 years, Merit has been your trusted partner, investing in affordable housing and people to build a stronger California. We believe everyone should live in a home in a community where they can thrive. And that's why, over our many years together, we've invested over $1.2 billion, creating, with all of you, over 11,000 homes, housing over 30,000 people. And as Merit's business grows, we've committed to you that we're going to invest in California. And our business has grown dramatically over the past couple of years. And so that's why last year, actually, at Housing California, we announced our Commitment to California initiative, which is a $2.5 million contribution that we are making to the industry, to the affordable housing industry in California, to attract, train, and retain the next generation of affordable housing professionals with a laser focus on making our industry more equitable, diverse, and inclusive. So that was last year. So let me tell you what's happened since we made that commitment a year ago. So first of all, I'd like to thank many of you for helping Merit have a record year. We invested over $250 million last year with many of you. And Thank you. And like I said, when you invest with Merit, you're investing in California. So our goal was to welcome over 190 participants under our Commitment of California initiative. And with all of your help, we blew that out of the water with over 275 participants. You might have heard of this program called HDTI. Merit committed to dramatically growing HDTI, and last year it had the largest and most diverse cohort of over 50 project managers, and that program has funding that's secure for years to come. And maybe some of the people in this room just last Friday got accepted to the next cohort of 50 HDTI participants, so congratulations. And then here in San Diego, we helped support the San Diego Housing Federation for our first of its kind partnership with the community college system to train property managers to serve our affordable housing residents. And Merit is hoping to scale that program statewide this year. And then we launched kind of the new iteration of our Merit Scholars program. We had hoped to have 6 scholars join our program this year, and because we had amazing demand, many of them because of you guys last year encouraged your friends and associates to participate, we had 16 Merit Scholars. And those scholars received a $10,000 scholarship, as well as a meaningful opportunity to learn more about the affordable housing field by access to a mentor. Thank you to the many mentors in this room. Fully paid attendance at local and statewide conferences like Housing California, and engagement with industry leaders. And I'm excited to announce that 2/3 of the Merit Scholar participants who are graduating this year already have jobs in the affordable housing industry. And so what I'm really saying is by Wednesday, we expect the other third to also have jobs in the affordable housing industry. As part of our dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we set a goal for 50% of our participants to identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or have lived experience. Well, goals are important. We set a 50% goal, and we blew that out of the water with 70%. So thank you. And I'd like to thank our partners. So Merit is the funder of these programs, but our partners are the ones who are doing the hard work. So I'd like to thank you all for the great accomplishments we've had over the year. I'd like to thank the California Housing Partnership, CCRH, CHAM, LISC, NPH, SCAMF, San Diego Housing Federation, and of course, our partners here today, Housing California. Looking around this room, this great room with so many people, I see so many people who have participated in our Commitment to California initiative, and I want to thank you. You've participated either as being a partner, as being a participant. Maybe you've hired a Merit Scholar, or you've mentored them, or you've recommended people to apply for the program, so thank you. And I'm really excited for all the great work that we're going to do together in 2023 and beyond. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more how when you invest with Merit, you invest in California, or you want to learn more about the Merit Scholars Program, which is accepting applications until April 17th, please come by and visit the Merit Scholars table right outside. The Merit table right outside. So at this point, it is my honor to introduce this afternoon's plenary. Across the state, individuals whose lives have been directly impacted by affordable housing and homelessness crisis are stepping up to be part of the solution. These advocates are translating their personal experience navigating inequitable systems and structures that marginalize people into leadership that is an essential element in our fight for housing justice. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from these leaders about the challenges they have faced, the impacts they are having, and we call upon all of you, everyone in this room, to think differently about what it means to truly value people with lived experience and the people who are bringing it to the table. So at this point, I'd like to invite John Brady, Executive Director of Lived Experience Advisors, to the stage. He has lived experience himself into homelessness, an MBA in marketing and operations, and an entertainment background. And John brings a unique set of skills, passion, and perspective while leading the Lived Experience Advisors. For 5 years, John has been an active advocate for the unsheltered in the San Diego area. He will serve as a moderator of our plenary this afternoon. Thank you, John.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I understand it's been an exciting day with a fire drill for many of us and challenges with parking. It was a great analogy as I was arriving here to find out that there was a fire drill and it was difficult to find parking. Because that's almost exactly what it's like living as a homeless individual. You never know when the next fire drill is going to happen, nor do you know where you're going to park on any given day. I want to thank Lisa and Ari for that kind introduction and for the leadership in this space. Also, I really have to give a massive dose of gratitude on behalf of all of us here on the stage for putting lived experience voices at the center of this year's conference. Thank you. We are the customers of the systems that you operate, and it is so impressive over the last 6 years that our voices are being heard. My journey into homelessness was very long, and gratefully, my time on the streets was relatively short. And that's not the case for many of the people that are on the stage today. 6 years ago, had you told me that I would be on the stage with other advocates addressing 2,000 California leaders, I would have laughed at you. Even when my psychiatrist shared her belief that I was going to become an advocate while I was living on the streets, I laughed and protested. But here we are. So if today's panel goes south, you can blame it on her. 6 years ago, I also suspect that there were not 6 lived experience individuals advocating for people living on our streets in all of San Diego. And there's 6 of us across California here today speaking to you. Then I got involved with the Voices of Our City choir, the homeless choir here in San Diego, that ended up on America's Got Talent as a finalist. Our first action as a group of people was to protest at City Hall. We were protesting the city's response to the All-Star game when they were putting rocks down underneath freeway underpasses and clearing the homelessness with the intent of presenting America's finest city does not have anyone experiencing homelessness or poverty. Looking back, I described that day and our actions as the 12 angry voices on the steps of City Hall. As far as I know, it may have been the first time a coordinated group of people experiencing homelessness addressed a legislative body in San Diego, which had up until that point little feedback from the people that they were sweeping away or attempting to serve. Today, at the keynote luncheon of the 2023 Housing California Conference, 6 lived experience individuals who are statewide leaders are going to address you and share our experience in in trying to inform the system about what is a statewide crisis, housing and homelessness. That alone is a seismic shift. It is also changing our work as advocates within and outside of the system. Moving from angry voices to effective advocates has significant implications for each of us on this stage. It is much easier to scream at the man than it is to participate in the snail's pace reform of our services system. Our work is not easy. It is rarely valued financially, and instead it relies on the spirit of civic service to improve and inform the system to improve the lives of our neighbors living on our streets. Unlike those before us, there is national recognition now that the system must be guided and informed by its customers. In the next few minutes, we hope to give or provide insight into how and why you should be investing in and listening to lived experience in your work.
That's right.
Allow me to introduce my amazing panelists who I spent the last week getting to know over the phone and dinner and today. We'll start with Jesse Gray. Jesse Gray is a member of Lived Experience Advisors, part of our team here in San Diego. In just a short year, Jesse has become a powerful voice representing veterans and the Black community in San Diego and people experiencing homelessness. He is a powerful leader and an incredible voice serving on multiple boards and committees. I'd like to introduce Nick. Nick Worrell has been justice engaged, experienced what it's like to return to the streets with no options. He also organized in Stockton, California, a homeless encampment over 3 years that operated with no supervision, 150 people, and limited impact on the community, except when they decided they needed to move the encampment for various reasons. Right, Nick?
Yep.
Cody Van Pelt. Cody experienced housing insecurity and the traumas of our youth system at an early age. She advocates for transition-aged youth who may not even recognize that they're homelessness because couch surfing doesn't seem like they're homeless. She is thriving and recovering from that experience and is now an active leader in Sacramento, California. Give it up for Cody.
All right. Yeah.
Valeria, perhaps the bravest person on this stage today. Valeria lives in the United States under the DACA program. She, from an early age, became an activist for people who are immigrants in this community that are serving this community at risk of being deported at any time. She is an amazing individual and will have a lot to share about what's happening in the central part of California due to the floods. Thank you so much for being here, Valerie.
Right now.
And last but not least, I want to introduce Reba Stevens. Reba has been an advocate in the Los Angeles area, an area impacted with over 70,000 people experiencing homelessness for decades. She spent 20 years on the streets of Los Angeles. She recovered in 1998, was housed in 2005, and Reba was one of the primary drivers of the report that started the analysis and recognitions that Black Americans are overrepresented significantly in the homeless system. So let's give it up for Reba. So bear with me, I'm going to sit down, we're going to have a conversation and talk about what it means from our experience to represent the community as advocates. So the first question that I would like to ask the group on the stage today is, and we're just going to go down the line, how did you become an advocate? What drove your interest in serving the community? And were there any leaders or systems that helped you to accomplish that? Jesse?
It is an honor to be here. In a phrase, I would say what drove me to be an advocate was, for the first time in my life, transitioning from situations I felt hopeless to one where I really felt hope. As a first-generation Jamaican American, growing up in a home without a father, to a military mother, I've had some of all of the ingredients of different broken systems that have dotted my journey to this point. From the immigration system my mother had to deal with, to the military-industrial complex, to just being a person of color in America. So when I was homeless, then there was substance abuse in the Bay Area, and it was after the pandemic when I used that time to get sober and really look at what I'd learned through all the pain, through a lifetime of disparities, and coming to San Diego and seeing for the first time that there were people that were doing more than just talking about the problems, but actually putting their blood, sweat, and tears into solutions for it. And that was something I was completely unfamiliar with, and it was nothing short of inspirational. But because of all the broken systems, it was absolutely the mentors that told me, for the first time after listening to me and me feeling heard, that there's a story to be told and there's a difference to be made. And I wouldn't be here without those mentors from the different organizations like Uplift San Diego, to Lived Experience Advisors John Brady, to RTFH's Tamara Kohler, and the list goes on and on. It just felt like now I could be impactful, and it mattered.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Nick, you've shared a lot about your story. Tell me, what got you engaged?
So, thank you for having us up here. I feel it's about time that the folks with the lived experience have a voice for folks to actually listen to. It's about time. But with that, I was homeless for 5 years. Started just seeing everything that's going on around, and then COVID hitting, it made me change the outlook on people. The people that are unhoused on the streets, for me, seeing that and living it is what made me want to start working with an organization to start fighting for those unhoused. I do understand some folks choose it, but I guarantee you the majority of them don't. And a lot of what the unhoused want is just to feel human, to feel like somebody cares. Just dropping off food and saying, God bless you, that's not enough. You need to really stop and have a full conversation so that you can understand the things that they're going through and the sacrifices that they're having to make. And it's with our system as broken as it is, it's hard to find anybody that wants to help with housing or anything else like that. So that's what made me jump in and want to do what I'm doing and continue to fight for those that I feel they don't have a voice.
Thank you.
So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
All right.
Cody, you've got a really powerful story. Tell me, how did you get engaged?
Thank you, John, for all of your amazing remarks, and thank you, everyone, for having us here. I'm very honored to be a part of this panel today. So I got into advocacy in 2020. I've been doing this for about 4 years. I've pretty much dedicated my life. But a little bit earlier than that, I began to advocate for myself in 2014 at the age of 16 years old. To society, I was not old enough yet to make decisions, but yet I was in a position where I had to figure out what was best for my mental and emotional well-being. while in the midst of growing, maturing, and experiencing the emotional turmoil many, if not all, of our teens experience in that time frame as an adolescent. As a 16, 17-year-old who was homeless, there is no room for mistakes. If you make a decision, you have to deal with the consequences, whether that's if you're losing a meal, if you are kicked out of someone's being able to sleep on their sofa. The chance for me to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes was stripped from me. From this experience, I had found my voice, a hidden talent, essentially, to use my voice as a power that something cannot take away from me. You may be able to take away my stability, a roof over my head, but the one thing you cannot take from me is my voice. And for those who are 16, 17 years old who have not found their voice yet, that is why I am sitting on this stage today, to give them that voice to be able to help them.
That's right, Cody.
Because all of our kids in California deserve a chance to make mistakes and learn from them to grow into an effective and powerful adult.
Thank you. Valeria.
So I would like to say that my advocacy journey started at a very young age. I came to the United States when I was 3 years old. I was born in Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico, and I'm very proud of my indigenous roots. At a very young age, advocating for my parents because of the language barrier, right? So doctors' offices, in schools, all of that. But I didn't start getting really into advocacy until I started college. During my undergrad, I found a student club called United Now for Immigrant Rights, where we advocated for undocumented youth navigating higher education, which then led me to collaborate with grassroots organizations around my community, and dealt with immigration rights, defending those inside of immigration detention centers, providing them with needs, and trying to find housing for them as well, which is very hard when you are undocumented. And I want to say that I did have a professor that pretty much mentored me through my advocacy. He taught me how to be proud of my roots and to not be afraid to speak and talk about my status, because it's something that impacts more than 11 million people that live here in the United States of America, right? Trying to find that American dream. So he really guided me and told me to advocate for myself, for my community, for my friends, for my family, for my neighbors, right? And I think it's a privilege to be here, to take up space, because oftentimes we're not given that chance. And so thank you so much for being here and allowing us to take up space today.
That's right.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Reva.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. And, I want to thank you for the opportunity, for the invitation to be here today. It's amazing when I think about where we are, a state conference, and a panel of most beautiful peers of mine with lived expertise. It was in 2005, it was about 5 years of being housed, after experiencing 21 years unhoused on the streets of Los Angeles, where I began to notice that there were a growing number of people becoming unhoused on bus benches. And the fear was paralyzing for me, because my greatest fear was that I was going to end up back outside. It was a constant reminder of what that experience was like for me. I call it the horrors of homelessness. And it was at that point in time where I was participating in Empowerment Congress, and conversation came up about the intersections of those being unhoused. And I'll never forget, I'd call her name, but she might be present, and what the heck? With Community of Friends, it was Dora Gallo who was preparing for us to have a session around mental health and those who are unhoused under Empowerment Congress. And I'll never forget asking, how do you have this session without the voices of those of us who have actually experienced it? And that was the beginning of my journey of being an advocate. I advocate today continuously because I don't never want to forget from which I came. And if you notice today the overrepresentation of black people who are unhoused on the streets across California, let me say that again, across California. The hope that I have is the voice and the experience in which I am willing to lean into discomfort and to talk about the true horrors of homelessness. In addition to that, to hold hands with those who are currently in our systems in order to remain current and aware of what the system of today is actually like. So again, I want to just say thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Reva.
And look forward to this.
So part of our goal is to talk about not only how we became advocates, but those who helped us get there, those that have continued our education, and how you can smooth the path for those of us that are speaking on behalf of the community at large living on our streets. And we've had a number of conversations in the week leading up to this about what are some of the impacts of us being re-traumatized, how challenging it was to learn about the system. I mean, if you consider it, a homeless advocate is somebody that has to learn about mental health. They have to learn about racial disparity, the immigration, youth, the impacts on youth, and all of these are impacted by different systems. So I want to open up the opportunity for everyone on the stage to talk about who was your mentor, or how did you learn? And perhaps, when did you face a challenge doing this work because you re-traumatized yourself? Anyone?
I guess I could go.
Thanks, Nick.
When I started out doing the unhoused advocacy, St. Mary's in Stockton, California, there's a gentleman named Dennis there. He works for Central Valley as well. But they go out and to the encampments for wellness checks and like taking waters and stuff like that out there to them. So because of that, because of him, it made me want to do more than what I was doing. So after that is when I started that 150 people encampment that we had. And he was helpful with that anytime we needed food or water stuff brought out, or like other organizations as well. But we were able to have another organization come out, pick up trash twice a week. So we just put all the trash from the encampment in one area. They'd come by, pick it up in a trailer, and take it out. Everybody in there that was in the encampment signed a contract with me and the organization that we were running it with, stating that there would be no fights, no fire, and if somebody had a problem, they would come to us and we would discuss it and try to fix it verbally versus fighting. Because a lot of the problem is everybody wants to fight for position, especially when you're unhoused, because you want a certain area of the town, per se, because they don't get moved as much, say. So, it's awesome to see the things that one person can do to help 150 people, and then see our city fail on doing any of it. Something needs to be done to fix that. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm sure all of us are here, to get that change made, or at least get more people talking about it to fix the situation that we're having.
Thanks. And you took that in an interesting direction, because we've also had some conversations about the fact that we're trying to improve a system that is not focused on the individual and their needs. Would anyone like to, Reva, would you like to talk about
Let's
that?
not focus on, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question clearly.
Oh, so
It's hard to hear.
it's hard to hear, yeah. So the question was, we are trying to work within a system that is focused on improving a system as opposed to focusing on the individual and their needs.
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. You know, what's interesting is in 1998, in the last shelter that I was in, there were rules, regulations, guidelines, procedures to staying inside of these shelters. But I found beauty in that, and when I find that today, most people steer away from some structure that I believe that is critically important to one advancing and thriving in life, and in addition to that, retaining their housing. And I tell you why. Because when we had chores that we did, such as cleaning up, washing dishes, cleaning the bathroom, whatever the chore was, making our beds, it prepared me for when I moved inside. So how do I relearn how to live again if we're not given that opportunity while we are in interim or temporary housing in order to relearn to do those things and to be accountable and responsible? In addition to that, for there are so many of us who are indulging in substance use, substance abuse, and inside of our temporary housing settings, we are not inviting Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and other 12-step fellowship programs, not necessarily to change folk, but to give us an option, an opportunity to be educated and informed about what it is that is available for us, so that we can begin to broaden our connections and relationships with healthier folk in our lives to partner with. So I just think that mental health, there's nothing wrong with being afraid of having conversations around one's psychological wellness. Thank you.
Thank you, Reva.
And then, am I able?
So,
John?
yeah, go ahead.
Can I go ahead and add?
Yeah.
So I can kind of answer both of the questions that you had just asked. When I was going through everything that I was going through, I didn't necessarily have a specific mentor that helped me with advocacy. It was more of how to be an adult, how to heal from my own trauma. Her name was Crystal. She was my therapist from when I was an adolescent up until mid-20 or maybe 22. And in a way, she saved me from all of the trauma that I had went through. She gave me my first real experience of stability. And now, as I say that, some of you might be thinking, oh, that's amazing that my therapist was able to give me this feeling of stability. But going back to the human factor and thinking about the individual, if you look at it from a deeper lens, I saw this woman once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks for 1 hour. And this person gave me more stability than my adopted parents, than my foster parents, than the system ever gave me. So when you look at it from an individual perspective and you look at it from just that, there's sadness to the story than just the positivity of this person showed me stability. So I just wanted to add that. And essentially, all of the work that I do now, even though I don't talk to this woman anymore, she made such an impact on me that everything I do now is to make her proud, even though she's not aware of what I'm doing.
Wow.
Thank you.
Amazing. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. All across the country and all across California, we are dealing with a population that has become frustrated because the belief is we are spending millions and billions of dollars more, homelessness is getting worse, And the response to the system universally appears to be criminalization. So let's talk about that. In San Diego alone, our mayor and a council member has announced a new law to further criminalize homelessness. We've got 1,900 people alone living in downtown in encampments. With that law, they've announced an additional 300 shelter beds. There were 265 people last week that requested a shelter bed and could not access one because it wasn't available, and that was by 8:10 in the morning when the system announced that there are no more shelter beds. So let's talk about criminalization. How does that feel to you that that is becoming the common response, and how do we as advocates respond to that?
I mean, I can
Reba?
go again, or you can go.
Yeah, I could
Go for it, Jesse.
So I feel like the reason we're seeing criminalization is because of the echo chambers that are getting more and more divisive. Like everybody in this room, that seems like a nonsensical approach to the solution, but the people that are pushing for criminalization aren't here. And that just goes back to the conversations we're having. Everybody in this room, we get it. It makes no sense. It's a waste of money, but we need to be having those conversations with people that don't see it from our perspective. The narrative needs to be going outside of this room. As great as these people are, we're on the same page. But the people that are criminalizing it, they're not here. Our stories and our narrative need to explain all the time. It needs to sound repetitive. You're wasting money. They have nowhere to go. You're arresting them. That's the incarceration makes no sense. But the conversations don't need to just be in our policies. They need to be in our conversations at homes and with random people.
Yeah. How does it impact you emotionally, or would you like to add something else, Reba? I mean,
Yeah, I spent, I believe I was arrested 10, 12 times, 10, 12 treatment facilities. And every time that I was arrested and released from jail, I had nowhere to go. And so I would end up right back on the streets. When I think about what is happening today and how more lax we have become, there is still not enough structure put in place to help build and grow folks so that we can begin to see, I need to see myself. I need to be myself to see myself to make the necessary changes about myself. But how do I do that when the systems of today are more leaning toward enabling so that we don't have to look at ourselves? And then we use certain language that is not quite comfortable, such as homelessness versus being unhoused. It's stigmatizing mental health versus psychological wellness or well-being. It's stigmatizing. And too oftentimes that self-stigma says to me, I can't let you know how I feel. I can't let you know that I need help or that I want to go and get help or that I'm receiving help. The elephant is always in the living room. The question is, are we going to put a tablecloth on or continue to put a tablecloth on and act like it don't exist? So criminalization of those unhoused runs wide and broad. We can't just talk about sweeps. We have to look at a broader and bigger picture. Because I was arrested for just being homeless. Not to mention, I'm going to give you something else I want y'all to all think about. I will never forget, it was cold, it was wet, I was tired, I didn't have no money, and I had no drugs. And my best thinking told me to walk in the police department and ask them to run my name. They said, arrest her. But guess what? I got rest, I got fed. But that was my best thinking, y'all. So we have to begin to take a look at the fact that we're talking about human beings. We're talking about survival. So we just can't have a conversation about criminalization without looking broadly at what are the situations and circumstances that folks are experiencing that positions them to even have to encounter a police officer.
Thank you. Amazing. I mean, so I'll share a story. Recently, I wrote an op-ed for the San Diego Union Tribune. I've been in the paper before, been in the news a lot, and when I read the article, for some reason, it traumatized me. And then I started getting the emails and made the mistake of reading the comments that were made in response to the article. So traumatization is part of our experience. Like, sharing our stories is really challenging work, and I was hoping that maybe one of you could talk about your experience feeling victimized again doing this work.
Well, for me, look, I'm just going to be real with it. Criminalizing homelessness is a joke. Our prisons are overcrowded. Our jails are overcrowded. What sense does it make to put more people in? So take that $1,500 a day or more that it takes to house an inmate and put them in housing. Give them something that's going to support them and give them a good feeling and make them feel good so that they can stay out of those jails or prisons. So, with that, we need change. And it needs to be done, better than what it is. They're taking our money that's supposed to be for the unhoused to fix the problem, and they're using that money to do sweeps. They're not using it to help the problem. They're using it to make it an even bigger problem. So you're pushing all the unhoused outside of the city limits because you don't want them inside. Where are the resources for the unhoused? Inside the city limits. So you push them out, how do they get help? How do they get those resources? How do they get anything? None of them have cars. They're on their feet. Half of them are handicapped. Half of them are drug riddled. I mean, it's a joke. I'm sorry, to me it's a joke. Criminalizing homelessness is the biggest joke I've ever heard in my life. But I'll stop there because I could keep going and I don't want to make anybody mad in here.
Thank you. No, I mean, what do you do when you're telling somebody they can't be there and you can't tell them where to go? Go ahead.
So, I agree with you, Nick, for sure. To your point, what you were saying, the work we do, telling our stories to be impactful is not easy. It's not something I thought about when I decided I wanted to make a difference by telling my story, but it's not always talking to people that see from my perspective. And that's painful. It's challenging. When I thought, I'll tell my story, I didn't think about, that means being a public speaker. But not only that, it means revisiting the pain that got me to this point. And some people are going to never think that it was as difficult as it was or is to talk about it now. So I get what you're saying. It's challenging. This work isn't a walk in the park by any means.
Go ahead, Cody.
It does get emotional, this work. It's, as I was telling you even last night, it's when you think about advocacy versus a assistant who works at a desk job, that job does not require as much emotional effort as advocacy work does. And anyone who personally knows me, I am a very, very positive, outgoing person when I am in spaces like this. But behind closed doors, there are times where I fall into the space and relive the why did all of this have to happen to me? And a lot of our foster youth ask that question, why did I go through all of that? Advocacy does help in giving that why question and answer, because I get to use all of my experience and help better the system to make sure our youth are not experiencing the trauma that I did, that they're getting the help that they need, and they're able to be adults without experiencing the generational poverty and generational trauma for their children. But it does get emotionally taxing, and it's one thing I do hope that everyone in this room does consider when you are seeing the smiles on our face and the energy that comes off of us when we're sharing our story and how it impacts the world, that in the back of our head, we face that daily. So, thank you.
Thank you. Valeria, I want to ask or start a question with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So, of all of us sitting here on this stage, you're the most at risk speaking on behalf of your community. You are potentially the least empowered person sitting at the table because of your exposure as a DACA participant and the risk that it presents for your family.
Yes.
What does it feel like sitting at the table like that? How do you respond to that imbalance of power? How could somebody on the other side of the table or in your community help you to enable your voice?
So sometimes sitting at a table where, there's not representation in our undocumented communities, it is difficult at times, but it's taking that risk of being uncomfortable and starting conversations that get people to think and see what other people's livelihoods are like. As an advocate, oftentimes we're asked to give free labor, and I think we need to start drifting away from that idea. We need to start paying a consultant fee for those that are giving their lived experiences. You guys like that term, huh? Because oftentimes we are re-traumatizing ourselves. We are exposing ourselves to things such as, for myself, deportation. Even though I am protected under DACA, that program could be taken away from me at any time. And that goes for a lot of youth and a lot of immigrants that have that, right? So when we're re-traumatizing ourselves, we want to be seen as valued, not just ourselves, but our communities, to encourage that. I think it's important to start normalizing that and to make your people feel empowered if they come from a diverse space. Let them take lead at a table. Let them have input on things that you may not be aware of or you have no lived experience in. Sometimes it just takes that one person to put input of their own lived experience. So,
thank you, Reba. Amazing. I mean, Reba, I know you have no fear speaking truth to power, but you also in our communications have shared that sometimes you sit at a table and you feel like you're a token, and sometimes you sit at a table and you feel like your voice is valued.
Yeah,
what does that look like?
Let me be very clear that it's not that I'm unafraid ever to speak it. It's about leaning into the discomfort of doing so. It is an uncomfortable conversation oftentimes to have because it's through a lens that generally one does not have. And I think you had mentioned value. And so it's also about value and not being tokenized and what does that look like? But also about, equity and the sense around fairness of how people with lived experience are being treated. And when there are situations or circumstances that happen, even amongst us, where is the conflict resolution to addressing situations or circumstances? It's not about being afraid of speaking a truth to power, but it's really about helping understand that one size don't even fit all with us. So how are we chosen or selected in order to be able to speak to certain subject matters? But in addition to that, being heavily involved in everything. Too often times we're called to the table to check the box. Well, we shouldn't be a checkbox. And if you are uncomfortable with the truth being told as a voice with lived experience, then you may want to take a look at yourselves. So too often times what happens is systems tend to want to select who they want to select to make it more comfortable to have the conversation. That's an uncomfortable conversation, and it's not fair. It's not fair because there are many people that are outside who are dying every single day while we're playing with checking a box. It's unfair.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, John.
Go
I
ahead.
think that it's also important to add being pit against each other. You know, the system tends to pit us against one another and never want to address that. And so I just think that it needs to be said. We need to ensure that we're being kind and thoughtful and fair and treating each and every one of us with dignity and respect, no matter what.
So just real quick,
Thank you.
I wanted to challenge every one of you in here. And that challenge is when you leave this whole thing, when we're done and you go home, stop somewhere. Find somebody that's unhoused. Have a conversation. Let them feel like a person. So that they know that there are people like us that care about what they're going through and what they're having to deal with. So I'm challenging all of you to do that when you leave this whole conference. Thank you.
Good challenge.
Thank you, Nick. And I know many people in this room have direct experience with people, who are experiencing homelessness or recovering from homelessness. One of the conversations that we had at dinner last night was talking about how it feels to sit at a table where you are surrounded by powerful leaders that may have a difference of opinion from than your lived experience perspective. And I want to get to how do we as lived experience individuals overcome that? How do we help you become people sitting at the table that can really respond to that directly? I mean, sometimes I sit in meetings where it's 10 individuals that I know philosophically feel different about homelessness than I may. Any thoughts about that?
I think that goes back to the training that it takes to get lived experience individuals to this point. Not only is there an element of healing, but there's a lot of training that goes on behind the scene. Like, shout out to Marisol at Housing Narrative Lab for the training she did. Awesome. And under John Brady, that training, and that goes back to the value that we are bringing, not only for an experience that you can't teach in a classroom, but the training that we have to understand all the acronyms that are happening at that table. You want to speak more to some of that training?
I mean, thank you, Jesse. I mean, I've been doing this work for 6 years, and so sometimes the numbers come easy. Sometimes I sit at a table and I don't understand the acronyms. I don't know what you're talking about as leaders in the community, and I have to have the embarrassing moment to raise my hand and go, what exactly did you mean by that comment? And I think the point that you're bringing out is that it's a lot of work for us as advocates to really begin to understand the system and inform you as the leaders of the system how to perhaps improve the performance indicators. Cody?
Yeah, I wanted to add, I was just kind of thinking about it as you were asking the question. I think also just being open to a change of perspective. It's okay to have a difference in opinion, but being open to the perspective, because if you think about it in terms of, say you have an electrician who goes to school and learns how to be an electrician, it's the same concept for us, but in a different aspect. The main difference is that we have to do it on our own. There are those who cannot teach us how to cope with the trauma that we have lived, but I had to go through my own journey of how to deliver and explain my trauma to an audience without being stuck in the emotional turmoil that comes with it. I am an expert in the lived experience that youth commonly face, but it takes a lot of work in a sense of training myself to deliver that to all of you. So if you think about it from a perspective of we have gone through our own extensive training to be able to do this, I think that might help you. So I hope all of you can be open to that different perspective.
And adding on to what she was saying about the electrician and the training, it takes 10,000 hours to be a professional at something. Who more to be a professional than the unhoused? Than us right here that have had the lived experience in being unhoused. We have collectively way over 10,000 hours of experience. So why wouldn't we be brought to every table that it has a conversation about the unhoused?
That's right. That's right.
So we've got 5 minutes left. I believe, at least in my conversations with the organizers of this conference, that the intention was for us to open you up to thinking about how can lived experience help you inform and create a more productive system that assists more people more quickly exiting homelessness and allows us to support you in your efforts to build more housing, because that's one of the other powerful things that lived experience people can do at the table is sit in front of a community group where you're facing torches and pitchforks and say, no, we are the community that you are describing as the homeless, and we are people, and we have recovered, and we are in housing, and we are no longer homeless. So I wanted to allow the group, to make any last comments about how we can help this group of leaders impact the system when it comes to our fellow homeless neighbors and those at risk of homelessness.
So I can go ahead and start.
Great.
So I do want to mention Housing California is one of the leaders on Bring California Home. When I became an advocate, it was the first policy that I got on board with and started advocating for. And I know from the first panel, a lot of mentions of the program HAP was mentioned, and that is part of what I've been advocating for the last 4 years. In that is included a 10% youth set aside that I've been advocating for the last 4 years. And in 2 years, we've seen a 21% reduction in youth homelessness. And the fact that Housing California has been a lead on this and given that opportunity, having youth at the table, those who are working with these organizations and testifying at the Sacramento Capitol and sharing with these policy leaders, that is what made this 10% youth set aside happen. I was there when it first was going, and it's proven to work. So if that's not proof enough of involving youth voices at the table when we are advocating, I don't know what will.
And I would say all the organizations here, you should have some sort of system in place to make sure you are having lived experience individuals at the tables and not just rubber stamping the ideas that are coming out of your organizations, but making sure you're valuing them as people, them for their time. I think it's nonsensical to be here and wanting solutions to a crisis that's getting worse and not making sure we are being valued both in time and our experience and what we do to share our stories.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Reva?
so, for me, we have finally made our way, for the most part, to the table. The question is, what happens when we get to the table? When do we arrive at that table? Because oftentimes, there is already a draft written. We want to be a part of the think tank. We want to be at the front of the bus, not at the back of the bus. We want to drive, because the truth of the matter is, if you don't know what the problem is, there really ain't no solution. And how many are willing, who have never experienced being unhoused, what it's really like? How many are willing to even test it Go and have yourself a weekend. You know, no shoes on your feet. Leave your keys at home. You don't have a wallet or credit card. Don't call the people that you know that can support you, but just go and experience it. I need y'all to understand something. There is so much fear associated with being unhoused. And we keep buzzing words, so many things. Housing first. We're going to house them first. Treat people with dignity and respect. What does that look like? What is equity? What does it really mean? And until we reach a point of recognizing the fact that in order for this to actually end, it has to begin with us. And there should be absolutely nothing about us without us. Nothing.
So I think that's a great way to end. I'm going to ask all of our advocates to stand up because we want to recognize you and thank you for making lived experience part of this conference and the center of all the work that you are doing. It is amazing for us to be here, and I want to thank each of the panelists who've committed an incredible amount of time working with me, Housing California, and we also want to thank each and every one of you who are here, from Tamara Kohler, who is a mentor for our team, to those of you that are leaders engaging with lived experience advocates and making them and their voices critical to this work. Thank you very much.
Remember, housing is a human right, not a privilege.
Yes.